Hello again. My name is KashCast, and this is another episode of the KashCast. We are back with yet another episode. I'm recording this shortly after my first part of Wasp Ranger, and I ended up back in the recording booth, so to speak, way sooner than I expected. Also, a brand new microphone, so hopefully any listeners at home will indicate a much better audio quality than before. Rest in peace, my blue snowball. She will be missed. However, with me, I have a brand new guest. I have David V. Kimball. David is a pivotal force in the online Super Smash Bros. Community, recently creating the Elevate documentary, going into huge amounts of details about the development of Super Smash Bros. Melee. But he's also a Twitch streamer, Discord partner, digital marketer, published author, website developer, founder of the Legacy TE mod for Super Smash Bros. Brawl. He's definitely got a full resume, and honestly, I'm just glad to have someone from the Smash community on board. Before I go on, I would also want to give you, David, the floor to describe yourself to the audience, in case there's anything I've missed, or anything you just want to contribute.
Man, Cash. Okay, that was probably the best introduction I've ever had on a podcast. Thank you. That was great.
Oh, thank you.
I have to ask too. You mentioned you upgraded from the Snowball. What mic do you use now?
The microphone that I have now, I think it's an Audio Technica USB microphone. Oh yeah, it's the ATR 2500X USB microphone.
It sounds really good on my end, at least.
Thank you very much, honestly.
Yeah, I just want to say I think you crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's for an introduction. The only thing I want to add that might be relevant to people, your listeners, is I also created Blippi.gg, which is a website where people that are interested in getting into Melee can go. So if you're listening and you've heard about Melee, maybe Adam's mentioned something about Melee, that's a great resource for you.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much, honestly. Recently, I ended up taking my old laptop out, and mysteriously, it's the only one I was able to get the overclock drivers on, but it's just been a blast playing on there, so
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Good, so I'm assuming you were able to use my tutorial for that?
Yes, it actually came in handy.
Good.
I'll be honest, I ended up just like going through your stuff recently, and it was like, okay, so I know you're the guy has like this really, really like elaborate, sick like Twitch theme. You capture a lot of footage for the use of content creators, and you obviously made a website. But then I go into your back catalog, and I saw that you were involved in Legacy TE. And I'm like, oh wow, I used to play that mod, and so just going in, it's just keep this guy coming up. So I honestly really respect like all you've done in general, and of course for Smash Me. So thank you very much.
Of course, I'm thrilled you played TE. Yeah, I think Legacy TE is one of maybe the keystone project that I've worked on with other people that I'm just really proud of. And I think anyone that's played Project M, I feel like within the last maybe 4 years has at least touched it. And it's really, really, I'm blessed because one, you can make something and put out in the wild, but it's another thing for the community to adopt it and use it. And so for that, I'm very thankful.
Yes. And also, I will say, as a video editor, I've only recently begun the long journey from moving from Vegas to Premiere, but I just have to say I really respect the stuff that you do. I know the one trail that you had where it was promoting Legacy TE, Legacy XP, and Legacy TE Lite. I'm probably getting the names confused, but like that video, everything, the music choice, the cuts, everything, that's like my favorite thing on the channel, honestly.
Wow, thank you.
No problem.
It was definitely a challenge because it was, when you're marketing one thing, it's easier to kind of zero in your focus on it. But when you're trying to talk about 3 different products, it's a bit tougher. So I think I forgot whose idea it was. I don't know if it was my idea. It could have been Kirby's idea to do the Wii channels as a way to like go between them. So.
Oh yeah, that was a very, very sick transition. Do you know who picked the song for it? Because that's one of my favorites. Did you pick it yourself?
Oh boy, it's possible. So the way that making trailers works, if you're interested in the process, at least the way that I make them is you know what you have to talk about. You have something that you're working on, and you have to make a video for it. But when it comes to being inspired for how to make the trailer or what to include, it's all about the song for me. I start there with the song. And if I hear the right song, it will put a picture into my head of the kind of thing I want to make, and then I just work from there. So I think it's really it's pretty telling that you mentioned the music choices, because music is everything for trailers, in my opinion.
I
Because
agree.
everything you're doing scene wise, it needs to go along. It needs to be its own kind of melody along with the song. So if there's a harsh cut in the song, that needs to be reflected in the visuals. If there's a beat and there's like, each clip roughly gets 2 seconds, it needs to be about that same time along with the song, or else it'll
Yes.
feel too drawn out, or it'll feel too short, or whatever. It's a pretty delicate balance.
Oh yes, yes. I completely agree, honestly. And the reason I can say it is because that on the side, in terms of like video editing, while I normally focus on YouTube and I am still getting out of infinite hiatus, one of my friends, Bash Dash, she actually has invited me for, I think so far, two we ended up like doing two commercials together. One for it was a local Melee PM and Ultimate tournament called NBA 2K 2019.
Nice.
And then the next year, I ended up doing a promo for a Splatoon tournament. And I'm also working on one that is also for a Splatoon I'm not sure how much I can say, obviously, because the commercial isn't out yet by the time I record this. But we kind of just have like a yearly shindig where we come together. He narrates and gets the footage. I do my magic, and it's been really nice, honestly. In fact, I'm the most proud of, well, the one I'm working on, because that's when I actually started to introduce motion graphics into. But I'm still really proud of the first one I did, because it was intentionally trying to emulate the 2000s Who Are You GameCube advertisement
Oh,
style.
what? I need to see this thing. You gotta send me it.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. It just like opens up during like a huge like basketball game, and I think it was like Bash's idea to just like layer the wombo combo up over it. But then right when he makes the dunk, you hear the screaming, and it's just perfect. It's perfect.
Oh, that I vividly remember the Who Are You Nintendo campaigns, and
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. Something about them really resonated with me. It was like the weird graffiti looking "Who are you" text, and
Mm-hmm.
the bizarre situations that they would show. I don't know if this is related or not, but
Yeah,
there
yeah.
was around the same time, I think, was it Kirby Canvas Curse or Kirby? It was like a DS Kirby game,
Oh
and
wait,
it
I
was this
think I know what you're talking
it's this
about.
bizarre like person dressed as this huge finger and
Right.
Kirby, and they're like walking into the sunset or something. And, like, that was like, this is so weird.
Yeah. But it's iconic because obviously it stayed with you. It
Yeah,
even stayed with me. I haven't thought about it in years.
and that's what, when it comes down to it, really effective marketing and advertising.
Mm-hmm.
It knows which eyeballs it needs to attract and when.
You say good morning, I say good night. Such a wonderful day when the sunlight came. Punch, punch from the rain.
Yes, yes, I completely agree. There's always like something about advertising, like looking back, that you kind of take for granted, just like how effective they are. Like
Oh
obviously you have
yeah.
stuff like Genesis does or Nintendo don't,
Hmm.
the Nintendo's Play It Loud campaign. Nintendo, man, just like looking back, Nintendo had some very odd marketing choices. Like
Yes.
hear me out on this, because I remember, and I'm have to pull this up in a tab, but I remember there was like an official rap that was commissioned. Oh yeah, it was by a group called Ambassadors of Funk, and they actually made a rap uh promoting and sampling Super Mario Land. It's just so surreal.
Wow, that sounds ridiculous.
Yes. I can't believe it, because like, and this is like, I think there's this like one thing for me and where it's basically just like if I had like two nickels or something, because it happened more than twice. But it's like this isn't even the only rap with Mario because Mario, this one, Mario Teaches Typing, the CD version actually had a rap. And I still don't, I would love to know like what sort of board meeting came up to have
No
this
kidding.
idea.
Yeah. And another funny thing that you witness is not
Mhm.
only were like early Nintendo ads and commercials just strange, but it also reflects the changing times. Like there's the Ocarina of Time commercial, pretty infamously now says that it's like showing the game, and it writes in Will Thou'st, and it writes in that language and like that Shakespearean like early English language
Mhm.
speaking. And one of the lines is, "Will thou save the girl or play like one?"
Goose.
And it's like, yeah, I don't think that'd really fly today, but back
Yeah.
then Nintendo was like using those bizarre messages. And then I don't know if you've seen the Majora's Mask commercial, but it was really dark. Do you remember it?
No, not on top of my head actually, but please could describe it.
So it's like, and I thought it was dark in a really compelling way, in a really good way. It showed
Mhm.
like it was this commonality of there'd be a culture in a certain area. Like they basically go around the world showing different cultures, looking up at the sky and seeing everything get dark, and there'd be a moon, and it just had this really
Oh,
ominous feeling. And then it kind of transitioned into like they show like the ancient like Egyptian pyramids and people looking up, or like they just have a bunch of different backgrounds, and then it just goes into the gameplay, and it's really spooky.
oh my God. Sounds like really, man, like that sounds like one of those things where it's like you don't even know you're being like advertised to until like the very end, but
Yeah,
still just like something that really hooks you in.
that's right.
Um
Yeah.
and it's funny because like we're on the topic, I just remembered that like earlier today, like before recording, I was watching Angry Video Gamer's newest video about this weird promotion that a hotel had where they gave you a VHS that was promoting Sega games, specifically Sega Game Gear games, and was just deliciously cheesy in a 90s way, but also it had elements of like, yeah, there's no way you could do that these days. But there's always like something you could admire about like something like that. Like, I don't know, I just feel like that aesthetic is just like still something that like I don't know, I kind of find thought provoking, honestly. Maybe
Yeah.
this might be my quote unquote old soul. Despite
Mhm.
my age, I remember just like growing up at a time where like I was just like playing old games concurrently with newer games. So I was like
Cool.
still running like a Windows 98 computer in like mid to late 2000s, just playing like stuff on like King of Fusion and Z-Death.
Huh.
And I remember correctly, all the time when I used to go into my aunt's house. Sadly, we did not have Smash Brothers, but they also had like a Nintendo 64 and a GameCube.
Cool.
So that was just like I spent like so many weekends on like Diddy Kong Racing, SSX Free, Capcom vs SNK2. I just Namco Museum, Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Stadium too. Like, oh man, like I don't know. I just feel like at that specific era, and I think that's probably why I had like more of a respect for like quote unquote older stuff because to me it was just stuff. It was just games. I liked it all.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think there's something to that though. So I'm probably a bit older than you. I'm 28. So I'm
mhm.
probably, I
You're
don't know
definitely
how.
older than me.
Right, right. But that being said, I grew up on the NES, which is
Mhm.
much older than me.
Yeah.
But I think, and they talk about this bias where if you feel like you were raised well, you think that's the best way to be raised, and you have to raise your kids that way. And in that
Yeah.
sense, I feel determined if I ever have kids someday, they're playing Super Mario Brothers as their first game, and they're going to work their way up from there. They're not playing Fortnite the first thing. They're going to play a good game to start out with. Then they can play Fortnite later if they want.
Oh
But
yeah,
I think
yeah, yeah.
but because you mentioned you played older titles more concurrently with the more recent ones, and that kind of gives you a perspective and an appreciation for something that maybe you wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise. And
Right.
I think there's a lot of utility in that. And one thing about the N64 era, you talked about this fascination with the 90s. I think part of
Mhm.
that is that was the beginning of just new media and just this vast amount of experimentation that was happening, and it was just
Yeah.
raw and weird and experimental. And now things are, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say, old good, new bad by any means. There's plenty of the refinement and the improvements over the years have led to some of the most captivating game experiences ever. But there is a rawness that's kind of missing. I would say particularly Relax just made a really great video on like the how did he word it? The mediocre era of Mario. I don't know if you've seen that yet.
Oh no, not yet, but
It's a great video. It's a really good video. I'm not going to spoil it or anything, but I think it really hits on where, if you think about Super Mario 64, there is stuff in that game that just makes no sense. There is no explanation for it. You have the evil piano in the Haunted Mansion. You have, and in Zelda, you have a literal mummies and these horrifying creatures in an E-rated game. You had all this stuff that had no business being in kids games, but that's because they were trying stuff out and they didn't know what the rules were, and things were 3D for the first time, and so things were quote unquote more real than they had ever been before.
Right.
And there's something really exciting and just enticing and charming about that. And I think as Nintendo became more corporate and as the medium got more refined and more mainstream, we lost some of that and some of the charm was gone. And then in the Switch era, I feel like they a little bit returned to form with Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey and stuff, where things were a bit more open world, things were a bit more, they didn't seem as overly refined. I don't have a really good word to describe what I'm trying to say, but hopefully you get what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. Looking back, like I also think it's kind of ironic because you're making me remember the fact that, if I remember correctly, for Odyssey's development, there were a bunch of like key people who formerly worked on Sonic games that ended up like really giving that like fresh new like bolt of energy that I think Mario needed. Oh yeah, it's actually very ironic in that sense, and people are also making Sonic comparisons to the new side story, in a sense, that comes with Mario 3D World.
Oh, Bowser's
Switch.
Theory.
Yes, exactly. So that's very interesting. Now we'll touch on that in a bit. But I do largely agree, honestly. I feel like, because like this is just like, again, like telling on me, because like not only, I don't know, I guess like in my experience, I wouldn't be the person I am today in terms of my taste in media in general. If I think it was two things. It was definitely the internet letting me being able to explore media at my own pace, at my own leisure, and knowing that just because something is older than me doesn't necessarily mean it's antiquated or that I can't be into it. But I also had really nice family members and friends who were willing to expose me to these things. So that's why, personally, I absolutely want to be that same way for my younger cousins. If the pandemic wasn't a thing, like I legit, I probably would have bought my laptop, bought my May Flash, went to my little cousin's house. We would have had a little bit of something. I think the last thing that happened before the pandemic hit, I was trying to get both my little cousins, I think they're about like 12 now, into Skullgirls, which I think that's like the quote unquote traditional fighting game that really got me into the genre. And of course, like they're gonna be into Smash Brothers as well. So it was just like really fun getting to just like rekindle that and just like try to be the big sibling figure that like their parents, their cousins were to me,
Definitely. That sounds like a great experience. And I'm sure, assuming your cousins acclimate well to what you're trying to expose them to, that's a great bonding experience too.
Oh, yeah. I remember when Sonic Mania came out, I was able to get one of my little cousins to just like beat Green Hill Zone all by herself, and I was just like cheering her on.
Cool.
And it was great. It's just really nice to just like share things with people. Not to say that like I want to like push my childhood onto them. Like absolutely not. Like I'll meet them halfway. Like I think like half the cartoons that they watch and stuff that I watch anyway. But it's nice to relate to them, but now without appearing as how do you do, fellow kidsy? You know what I mean?
Sure. there's some sincerity there that I think comes across, and then you can kind of share things instead of feeling like there's some other force. And this reminds me, I was listening to your previous episode as of this recording time, anyway,
Oh,
and
thank
I
you.
and I really appreciated how I don't remember the name of your guest, but as I talk through this, you might remember this conversation and be able to properly
Oh
credit the
yeah.
person for this.
Oh yeah.
But
Not to cut you off for 1 second. For anyone listening at home, the guest was Wasp Ranger, and we'll have him back eventually to promote his recent videos on My Gym Partner and Camp Lazlo, which you should watch. But yes, continue.
hopefully this is the right one that I'm talking about. You guys
Mhm.
were talking about the troubled Sonic community and how there's this dichotomy between classic and modern. Am I thinking of the right
Yes.
one? Okay,
Yeah,
great,
that's
great.
exactly the right episode.
Great. And what I appreciated about it was, there you might lean more one way or the other as a player in terms of what you enjoy playing, but there's this, I think, and this also relates to the Smash community, especially right now. There's this default human tendency to participate in tribalism. So let's say you have a
Yes.
slight preference for modern Sonic controls, and you might enjoy even the classic Sonic ones, but it can't be about that. It's got to be your team modern Sonic, and everyone
Yeah.
else is the enemy, and it's so ridiculous. But I think that's how you can compare it to the Smash scene with, you might have a slight preference for Smash Ultimate, so your Team Ultimate screw all the Melee players, vice versa,
Yeah.
And I think I'm really interested, and when you and your guests were talking about that, it made me think, how can we really address that and call it out and say, let's not contribute to tribalism. Let's find ways to, and acknowledge everyone has preferences. One thing that I've noticed in YouTube videos,
Yeah.
alert, I have my own opinion. You need to be okay with that. And I'm like, isn't that really sad that we have to like even say that? And
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
ridiculous to me. I don't know. So I guess that's a pretty long-winded way of saying I like the previous episode. I feel like you guys applied a lot of nuance. You shared the merits of both kinds of games, and it made me really excited to be on the show. So
Thank you very much. And honestly, tying together Smash discussion, Sonic discussion, like a YouTube channel that I keep up with, and have help with art like a long time ago. The Geek Critique. Shout out to Josh in the unlikely event that you listen in on this. But I remember his old Melee video, he actually addressed that for a bit, where if I remember correctly, he said that Melee, because obviously he grew up with it, but it was like so amazing for him and his friends. Like it felt like 60 Door was something but a tech demo, and then that's when he had to go into a little bit of discussions where a lot of these people have a huge preference towards one entry, and then just completely dismiss like everything. And I still kind of see that today, and it's kind of disappointing.
yeah.
Were you gonna say a point? I want to make sure that you get your
Oh,
sense in.
no, I was just gonna say I agree. It just seems like an inevitability at some point. I don't know if there's
Yeah.
much we can do.
But I think that's the thing. I have like a real unique perspective when it comes to stuff in general. Like when it comes to Smash. My first game, Brawl. I obviously like emulated Smash 64 on Project 64 on a freaking keyboard to prep myself up in a sense. And I think like my most attachment to that, since I didn't grow up with Melee, was probably Super Smash Flash. But I remember correctly, I got Brawl solely because of the fact that I love Sonic. I knew Sonic was in there. But like from there, like I just like got into Brawl and obviously Brawl mods, and then in the wake of everything that happened with Melee, I wanted to quote unquote get good, and I could actually appreciate the people who do see Melee in a certain light. And when it comes to Sonic, it's also complicated because I don't like, despite someone being my age, like the circumstance that I grew up in, I don't really have a huge preference towards the adventure games. I admire what they represent, but I only played Sonic Adventure DX. I didn't play Sonic Adventure 2 in 2012, and while I admire the story, admire a lot of stuff in it, I couldn't get into it because I was high school at that time.
Mm.
I more find myself aligned towards the quote unquote dark ages. And some of those titles I still either have fun with or can see why someone could find merit in those games. Especially like narrative wise, but this is also like a point I made previously. But I feel like especially now, I'm not so much like of course, like if we are to believe leaks, I am of course disappointed that full on remakes of the Avengers games are canceled. I'm definitely bummed about the fact that it feels like only my era games is the one that quote unquote ruined the franchise. And I can understand why people my age are frustrated when people older have basically gotten their just desserts and they are continually getting their just desserts in marketing. But I also really reflect on how these same people at like a decade ago, they were kind of complaining too with the whole Green Eyes debate. And while Sonic 4 wasn't exactly the gift anyone asked for, it was a gesture towards them. And, now, ironically, we're back where we started with colors, and now people might be doing the complaining. I'm not really of a, I'm not really of a mind where I feel like giving a Sonic Adventure free. I wasn't even I moved on from that. It was very awkward. Trying to explain to people who were tuning into the 25th anniversary stream. It's like, nah, we ain't gonna get it. Like, I'm just whatever. I just want something good, something
Yeah.
that is unabashed to be itself, something that, like, I don't know. It's just like I'm not opposed to 2D. Obviously, like I'm also not really good at the classic Sonic games, but I am working on it. But I'm not gonna dismiss people who like or grew up with it.
Right.
But I'm sorry. I've been
No, I'm agreeing with you. Keep going.
oh yeah. But it's like I don't know. It's like 2D. Not only do I disagree with the notion that like they should just like quit with modern Sonic in general, but I also don't think that 2D and modern Sonic can't coexist as like side games, like something in the advanced spirit. I feel like there are earnest ways to take what works in multiple things that like many different no subsections of communities like, and try to make it work instead of just having just like a little bit of idea, and instead of just like working on it because the execution isn't the best, just completely either shove in the trash or pull forces and try to please everyone and end up pleasing nobody.
Yep.
But yeah, that's basically my point. I could ramble on this stuff for ages. It's a miracle I'm not a Sonic podcast.
It's true. Yeah. But those are the kind of insights I really appreciated.
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of good points to it. I personally, to give you a full idea of all my biases,
Mhm.
I started playing Sonic and Sonic 2, the original Sonic 2. So I started playing the 2D Sonics, but then I really got into Sonic more during the Dark era.
Mhm.
I like Sonic Adventure 2 a lot, but I really liked Sonic Generations like much, much later. Actually, I was in college when
Oh
that came
yeah.
out. And I loved it. I loved the daytime levels of Sonic Unleashed and despised the Werehog levels. And like, I know that's such a unique take, but
Yeah.
like, so I thought it'd be fun if I could lay out for you what my ideal Sonic game would be, and then I want your feedback on it, and then I want your version. Is that okay?
That is perfect. I'd love to
Okay.
hear you.
All right, so this is basically what I would want. And again, I started on 2D Sonic, but as I've experienced games more, I actually like the boost Sonic stuff a lot. But I also like elements of adventure. So this would be the perfect Sonic game. The 4Kids TV English voice cast. They're my favorite group by far. I know that's kind of controversial. I know people like Ryan Drummond for Sonic, but I'm a Jason Griffith man. I love him for Shadow. I love him for Sonic. I think he does a great job.
Ooh,
And
I
that
agree,
entire
honestly.
era. Okay, so that's the first part of it.
Okay.
I want it to have the overworld of Sonic Adventure, or at least something like it, where you have this hub world you have Station Square and you have places you can run around. I love that part of Sonic Adventure. I want the scope and the storytelling of Sonic Adventure 2 because they did a really good job with storytelling. And then I want the variety of characters and the character like variety of Sonic 06. I think that's got the best Sonic variety to pick from. I want the level design of Sonic Unleashed daytime levels for all the levels. And then
Uh-huh.
I want the controls of Sonic Generations because I think that has the best offer in terms of controls.
Oh, yes.
And then I want like the really awesome CGI cutscenes of Shadow the Hedgehog to kind of
Ooh.
just kind of like, so if you take my meaning, I think all the games I've mentioned have had really strong components of it, and just my best Sonic game would be a Sonic Adventure 3 with all of those things put together.
Honestly, like, that is incredibly enticing. And also, honestly, huge props for even acknowledging that the CG for Shadow the Hedgehog's cutscenes is just, like, really good. You rarely hear
Right?
anyone bring that up.
They're so good.
And, like, of course, like, Sonic Unleashed, like, that's just, like, movie quality. But, like,
Oh yeah.
to know that they could, like, do that, like, what, like, 2 to 3 years earlier? Like, on the
Mhm.
GameCube? Like,
Yeah.
oof, no way.
Oh
And
yeah.
now, honestly, all your ideas are honestly like really enticing, and it's honestly to the point where like I don't really know if I'd have to think for a bit. Feel free to hear me out on this. Now, obviously, something that's unique about me. I think like the first title that I had for myself was probably Sonic Rush on DS. That's like the first Sonic game that I like legit owned.
Mm.
However, a lot of my formative years were spent just like lurking the Sonic retro forums and just playing a bunch of Sonic hacks and fan games. So
Huh.
I do have like a little bit of that inkling that I feel like most older people just like have like this third eye, just like knowing the Sonic classic physics like back of their head.
Mhm.
So, ideally, I completely understand and agree with you liking the 4 Kids cast. Honestly, I really thought, not to say that I'm opposed to having Roger Craig Smith return, but I just like felt like, this like the end of an era. It's okay. Like, this is a new era of Sonic, new decade. I want to see something new we can bring to the table. So
Yeah.
yeah, but to continue, I don't know, like I would honestly be for I guess if we're talking voice acting first, I'd honestly be for if we like pick and choose between the Adventure 4 Kids cast, but for Sonic have someone completely new.
Hmm.
I know for a while people were really pitching for I think Max Millman for Sonic. I think he now granted I've never played a Persona game,
Mm.
but I think he voices Ryuji in there, and people had a couple of his voice clips, and I'm like, no, I could picture this dude as Sonic. That's like
Hmm.
a very fresh take. Now for gameplay, um obviously I am biased. And while I do like the Boots games, and Generations is one of my favorites, in general, honestly, as someone who likes Sonic Rush, I don't know. I feel like there was something about that like general aesthetic and that more like pop arty, arcadey, in your face vibe that like didn't quite translate over to the Boots game. So I would love it if we had like a little bit more of that, and not only just like style and gameplay. Like even like to me, I think like what appealed to me for Sonic Rush, because it was just high octane and very no, it's kind of like crushing as you're a kid and just like going through it the first time. But like as you learn to just like deal with some of its cheapness, it really just like starts pushing you to just be like a really good player, just like getting faster times and just doing cool stuff. I remember doing a lot of the same stuff in SSX3, including experimenting with tricks, improving my routes, even the boost gauge. So I feel like if we had something like in terms of gameplay, just like having a little bit of that vibe, maybe borrowing a little bit of that spark from the Jet Set Radio series, we can go there. Ideally, I would want to go fully 3D. Not to say that I think like
Hmm.
the 2.5D 3D thing is bad, but I do think, especially in a post Forces world, it has run its course. I wouldn't be opposed, however, if there were like some sort of like 2D bonus mode, like the Sonic Simulator and Sonic Color, just like a side thing. Um, and honestly, uh, your idea for a Sonic 06 style of handling characters. So for people who don't know, the way Sonic 06 handled uh multiple characters, that while there were 3 separate stories, Sonic, Silver, and Shadow, you often in the levels switch characters to other playable characters and then switch back. So, for instance, if you are in Wave Ocean Sonic Story, there is a section of the first level where you have to do something as Tails, and then when you're done, you go back to Sonic. So,
Mhm.
like that. I think that's a real unique thing. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. In terms of story, now this is where I flex my animation perspective a bit.
Hmm.
Now, while I definitely agree with the fact that not many people seem to specifically like the direction that Ken Pontac and Warren Graff have taken Sonic games, I don't necessarily think is indictment on them for not being familiar with the franchise, writing these stories, but I can't understand most rational people being frustrated. But I think it's frustrating because that Ken Pontac specifically has had a very like full resume in terms of like writing for TV shows, and one of the more obscure shows. I would be impressed if you're familiar with it. Roswell Conspiracies, which I think shown on Fox Kids and some lower channels back in the 90s, has, I don't know, it just like has that sort of like Y7, but still kind of dark, kind of trying to squeeze as much as you can. Think like an X-Files meets like Batman Beyond type thing. Something that takes
Okay.
itself seriously.
Cool.
So yeah, it's actually like, pretty underrated. But it's like I saw him in the credits and I'm like, this guy's good. So it's just like interesting that he wasn't necessarily putting that same energy into Sonic.
Hmm.
Huh. However, I
It's a
will
kid. It's a
say,
kids thing, bro.
yeah.
It doesn't matter. We don't need to put any effort in the story.
Yeah. And see, while I can understand that perspective, a lot of the things that I am passionate about, including Tokusatsu, that's a different podcast, are the fact that like despite these being toy commercials, you really get an idea
Oh
of
yeah.
people who really care and put passion. And I know specifically, there's one of the adventure writers who has expressed interest in coming back. So I would want him to come back. And I don't know, this to finally close out and give you a chance to speak. I think an interesting part of these storybook games, well, 2 things. Their writing portrayal of the characters, and just for the sake of just having other people join in. Multiplayer modes. I think it's fun to just like have something double as like a like a party game. You just like
Yeah.
pop in, just like have fun. I think even Mania handled that well, just having like a little competition time attack mode.
So, and Sonic 06 too. Sonic 06 has had a really good multiplayer too.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've heard a lot of stories of people just like going to town with that. But I know a lot of my stuff will probably make more sense if I wrote it down. But those are the things that I would necessarily want to see in a new Sonic
Yeah.
game.
Hey, I think for the first time I asked you this question with no prep, I think you did a great job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Now, we are doing good for time. Like so you could feel free to just like answer these like a little bit quickly. Just to make sure we get like everything that we would need. And feel free to elaborate on anything if you want. How's that
Okay.
sound?
That sounds
Uh,
great. How many questions are there? Do you know?
okay. I do have a question from my friend Bash Dash. Some of this we covered earlier, but Bash Dash says, would love to hear discussions on how he got involved in the Melee community, what inspired him to create Elevated, how he did research for Elevated, and what got him into mods from Melee HD to PM Legacy.
That's right. I did see that on Twitter. Those are great questions.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think I'll start with, because there's an order of operations here that'll kind of tell me how I got involved in Smash in general, and then I can go into how I got into modding and then to more into Melee stuff. So it all started in 1999. I know I was alive back then, and I was at a friend's house, and he had a Nintendo 64 before my brother and I did. We still had our NES, and he introduced me to Super Smash Brothers. And I remember not recognizing most of the characters on the roster at that time. I knew who Donkey Kong was, I knew who Yoshi, Kirby, and Mario were, but I didn't really know who Fox McCloud was. I didn't really know. And I remember my friend, he had this twinkle in his eye, and he picked Samus, and he said, "Is Samus a boy or a girl?" And one of my proudest moments, how old was I at that time? I think I was maybe 6 or 7. And I said, Samus is a girl. Because I had this universe brain moment where I thought, it seems like Samus is a dude, but why would he ask the question if Samus was a dude?
Right.
And that was the first moment in my life I implied cognitive dissonance to my as a 6-year-old. Anyways, so I had that very, very specific memory. But anyways, I just loved Smash ever since the 64, and that was one of the first games we got when we sold our NES and all of our games. We got all of our money saved up, and we bought an N64, and that was a golden era for us of gaming. And of course, we spent hours playing Smash 64 with our friends, and just, oh my goodness, so much fun. That's the first game that I played. And then I remember hearing about Melee coming out. So, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, but one thing that was so fun in making the Elevated documentary, which is of course details the development of Melee, was returning to E3 2001 and returning to these moments I recall as a child happening. Of course, I was a tiny child, and I wasn't actually at E3 or anything like that, but I still remember. I remember the kiosks in Fred Meyer, and I remember the kiosks in these stores that had the Melee demo or had a Melee cinematic movie, and just thinking, this is the future. Like, look at this thing. It's so realistic, and it looks beautiful, and there's so many characters that I love that are in it. Because by that time, I was familiar with Star Fox 64. I was familiar with F-Zero and all these other games. Because having the 64 really opened us up to a bunch of new exciting titles. And so then I remember my friends saying, "Yeah, they have a character that's 2 characters in one." And I thought, that's unfair. How does that work? And oh yeah, Zelda's in the game. What, Zelda? Yeah. And when you use her down B, he turns into a boy. It's really weird. Oh, really? I had a very limited understanding of the Zelda lore at the time. Yeah. And so anyway, then eventually we saved up and got a GameCube and played Melee, and Melee was just, as far as sequels goes, it is probably the dictionary definition of best sequel ever made, as far as I'm concerned, for anything. And I think a lot of people would agree. So then I experienced that. And then by this time, when Brawl came out, we were kind of Smash and just game Nintendo fanatics. And I remember going to the midnight release of Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and at our local GameStop, and there was a tournament held outside. It was actually a Brawl tournament. So before the game came out, I remember the GameStop employee popping the disc in, and everybody chanting, "Load, load, load, load."
Oh my god.
Because of that loading screen for Brawl. And we started it, and I remember practicing as Link in Melee. And so I played Link in Brawl because I knew that was one of the characters you play. I was not a Link main, I was a Sheik main, but I didn't know if Zelda or Sheik was a playable character for this demo at GameStop. Anyway, and before that, Brawl came out in Japan probably a month or two before it did in the US. So my brother and I went to my dad's office where he had high-speed internet, and we binge-watched all the Subspace Emissary cutscenes and watched a bunch of gameplay footage. And we were so excited, and we started playing it. And years later, I want to say 2012, 2013, I did some internet searches. I heard about something called Balanced Brawl. I didn't know what it was. And Balanced Brawl was the very first mod of Brawl I heard of. You put it on an SD card, and you put it in your Wii, and it worked. And I didn't get that, but I tried it, and I thought, finally, Brawl with no tripping. This game is totally playable now. This is great. And then what was funny after that was I didn't realize that by leaving in the SD card and not launching it properly, it would cause the main game of Brawl to freeze. So for the longest time, we thought our game was just broken because we tried to play the game and it was frozen. And I know you have some experience with Brawl mods, and you'll know that they can be prone to crashes or just really odd things. And anyways.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so the rest is not as important. I was super into... I learned about Project M, which was pretty pivotal. But I mean, the Smash games afterwards, you're a Smash fan. Nothing's really different. You got into Smash 4 and Ultimate and all that. But what really got me coming back was Project M and how fun it was. And I think 2.5 was the version I started playing on for PM. And I got into that. And then I started getting into competitive Melee because I learned, there's so many cool additional things in PM, but oh man, the gameplay's like Melee. What's that about? And then I learned about the competitive scene, and that was just before the Melee documentary came out, the Smash Brothers.
Oh wow,
So
perfect timing.
yeah, I wasn't actually a doc kid. I got into the competitive scene a year or two before the documentary, but of course I'd played since 2001. I mean, I was a huge fan of Melee, and then I got more involved, and then I learned about texture swapping and music swapping and Brawl. And then I thought, well, I'm gonna make my own custom build, and I don't know, Super Smash Bros. Legacy sounds pretty cool, so I'll pick that name. And then I made this really crappy personal build called Super Smash Bros. Legacy, but I made a trailer for it. It's funny, you and I talked about making trailers, and
Yes.
that was I remember the Project M Twitter account tweeted me and said, "This is really cool, good job." And that was, as I mean, it sounds silly now, but when I was working on it at the time, I thought this is the coolest thing ever. The Project M Twitter senpai noticed me. And of course, now I personally know the guy who ran that Twitter account, and we're friends now. And he's not some special guy. He's just a guy like me. But it's funny how you think of things like that when you're new. And so that was kind of the story of how I got involved. And I worked on Super Smash Bros. Legacy XP when I merged with another team after the PMDT shut down. And then I started a new project called Legacy TE, which is kind of the tournament version. It was, if you know, Dan Salvato made the 20XX TE version of Melee.
Oh yes, yes.
That was my inspiration for Legacy T. I thought I want to make the tournament version of Project M, and we worked really hard at it, and we added a bunch of quality of life stuff and a bunch of new stages and costumes, and the community, after some initial hesitation, did end up adopting it, and it was kind of the mainstay for Project M tournaments at that point. And then, of course, at some point, Project Plus took over because I was never interested in doing character balancing or stage balancing. I never felt like I wanted to go into that because that's a whole can of worms. But
right.
So I was more than happy to say, okay, Legacy TE 2.5, here's this incredible base where you can kind of make your own builds. And then from there, of course, the Project Plus team went on from there. And in their launch trailer, they gave us a shout out, which made me so happy. So
Aww.
I'm really happy with that. But after that, I kind of went back to Melee a little bit more. And that's where I made Blippi.gg, and I kind of played it a little bit more on stream. And at some point, are you familiar with Beta 64?
Yes, he's on YouTube, right?
He is. And I watched a lot of his videos in 2014-ish, like right when I was graduating college. I know I just dated myself again. But I was a really big fan of his videos, and I remember at one point thinking, his Beta 64 episode on Smash 64 was fun, although he called Sakurai Sakura, and I will always bother him about that until the day that I die. And he's very embarrassed about it. But we're actually good friends now, and we actually got to meet in person, and we share some communities on Twitch and stuff, and he's a really, really awesome guy. Him and his wife, really, really
so cool.
Great people. Yeah, but anyway, more recently I thought, dude, Andrew, you got to make a Beta 64 episode on Melee. Like, you have to. And so he's got a lot of stuff going on. So I thought, screw it, I'll do it. So that's what Elevated is. It's really the Beta 64 on Melee. And I thought, goodness, HAL Laboratory and Nintendo are so secretive about their development. But it turns out, there's tons of interviews of Sakurai, and he wrote in columns in Famitsu, and there's of course all the interviews, and there's a Melee website that's still up. You can actually still access it on the Japanese Nintendo website. So I figured,
that's insane.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. And then, of course, Source Gaming, who I'm sure you know, Source Gaming and Push Dustin and all those guys, they translated a bunch of these articles from Japanese to English, and so they were all things I could read. And turns out there's actually a pretty interesting story there about the development. And so I thought, okay, well, let's lay things out chronologically. What happened when? So I started this outline. And I just did research. I probably spent a week, and I watched every video on Melee. I watched all the Did You Know Gaming videos I could about Melee.
I watched,
I read every article on everything about Melee I could. I read all the Q&As. I just did tons of research. And then I spent one Saturday, I probably spent 8 hours writing a 15-page script in one day. I just wrote all of it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting about work ethic is, if you have the right motivation and if you basically have an end goal in your head about what you want to create, and you have the motivation and the incentive to do it, there is nothing that can stop you.
Mm-hmm.
And that I had the eye of the tiger that day, and I busted this thing out, and I thought, the scope of this is immense. I haven't made anything like this before. I've made videos before. I've made trailers like what you mentioned, but I haven't made like a documentary style video before. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go all out. And I I was collecting Melee like merchandise and stuff from like 2000 and 2001 and 2002, and I thought I got enough money saved up for my streaming. I'm gonna buy a freaking mirrorless Sony DSLR grade camera and shoot
Ooh.
B-roll, and I'm gonna and I was able to make that investment. And I just thought this is going to be my magnum opus. And the more that people showed interest and the more they got excited about it, the more I just thought this has got to be big. And there's a quote from Sakurai where he talks about the music of Melee, and he says, yeah, Melee is a significant event for Nintendo. Not only is it like a GameCube, a flagship GameCube product that we have to showcase to kind of show the world what the game you can do. It's this uniting of all of Nintendo's all-star characters. We got to pay for an orchestrated soundtrack. We have to do it, and I will pay for it myself if that's what's required. It has to be at that level. And he used the word elevated. He says we can't just use the music from the other games. That's not really the point of Melee. The point of Melee is to really elevate the whole experience. I said that's the name of the documentary. Elevated. Gotta be it. So that's how it started.
Oh man, that is just it's just so admirable. Like, oh my god. Honestly, like I can relate when it comes to having a magnum opus. I've had a video I've been working on. It's a review of a show that just wrapped up in sci-fi that I think you might know. Since you said you listened to the previous episode, you might know what I'm talking about. But this is a video that I've been working on for like at least like 7 months.
Whoa.
It just like turned out like it started just as a 5-minute just like impressions on the show, but then stuff got longer and it got bigger. I wanted to get more involved, and I even just reached out to someone who used to work on the show for the sake of just like getting a lot of just like insight behind the scenes. And then I got like some friends along, and as we speak, I'm getting one of my friends to just help like wrap up just like final editing on it. And I think that's gonna be my magnum opus, and I just like relate because it all comes back to the amount of just like dedication and energy that Sakurai is putting into Melee. It has to be perfect.
Yeah.
And I know perfectionism can be dangerous when you're living on the edge, especially as how Sakurai was. But when you just like look back on it, it's all worth it. And that's something I can like really admire.
Yeah, that's awesome. I cannot wait for your video to come out. I will definitely be watching it, and it's just it is something you can relate to Sakurai. I would say his perfectionist levels are extraordinary, not only because they're so strict, but he actually releases things. He actually,
Yes.
because usually if you have a perfectionist to that level, it stays in development hell in some senses, where it never sees the light of day because it's never quite perfect. And
Right.
that goes back to modding a little bit, because in the modding projects I was in, I was working with some tremendously talented people. But what you'll notice and what you'll find in a lot of the modding projects around the brawl modding scene, I'm sure other ones too, is you have these really talented people, but of course they're not getting paid or anything like that, and they're these perfectionists, and so they get like 95% done and they just sit there and they never get released because it's just not perfect. It's not quite what they want. And so I think
my God.
an artist or a project manager or content creator, however you want to phrase it or think about it, you have to make a calculated call at some point where you say, you know what? It needs to exist and it needs to be out there. And it's not going to be 100% perfect, but I need to be okay with that so that this thing releases it all,
Yeah. And there's always a next time. You know what I mean?
Yep, there's always you're always getting better for the next time. That's right. And then what's funny too is the stuff that you see. I published this video and there are 3 glaring errors in it. Oh my gosh, it's going to bother me. Not a single person I've talked to has even mentioned them in the video.
Oh,
so
yeah, I have.
You're your own worst critic. Right, exactly. You're your own worst critic, and you really shouldn't let those little tiny things get in the way of letting people enjoy something that you've created, in my opinion.
Oh, yes, for sure. And I think like anyone, like you've been a great guest, but I know like obviously you're gonna be the most unique guest because normally I stick to like art and the YouTube cartoon community. But I think like for anyone who's listening, be you an artist, be you a gamer, be you whatever in life, the words that we've been discussing hopefully bring you some sort of semblance of like inspiration to just like keep moving forward.
If you have a dream and look, don't think about necessarily what other people want. If there's something you're like, I want this to exist so badly, and you have the means to do it, I would take that and run with it as far as you can go, and then consider anyone else enjoying it as a bonus. But really, if people see some content that you're like, this must exist, I want this to exist because I want to make it, people are going to be naturally interested in it.
Oh yeah, I could not agree more. Now, man, that was just like a great discussion. I
It was
almost wish
awesome.
you could. Oh yeah, I almost wish you could end on it, but we just have like one, maybe two quick things I just want to address.
Let's do it.
Okay. I just like going down a list. First off, just to lightly touch on it, as a fellow Chic main, it is very nice to hear that you have a real good taste in characters. So just props to you for that. So to keep it Smash related, now obviously Fire's Pass 3 for Ultimate is almost done. We just got Kazuya from Tekken. Now, let me just ask, if you can make your own Fire's Pass for Ultimate, who would be on it and why?
Well, since Banjo-Kazooie are in it, it doesn't matter anymore, right? No. When you ask the question, do you mean who would, if there was what, two left? There's two left, I think.
Oh,
Or
well,
one left.
I think we only have like one left, but I just said a whole Fire's Pass, so like you can just like
Gotcha.
go hog wild. Yeah.
Right. So like maybe like 5 characters, are you thinking?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. So if there was a third Fighter's Pass and I could pick them, I think either Spyro or Crash. I don't know. One of the two to represent the Sony era, I think would be a huge deal. I don't necessarily have a personal connection that much to Crash, but I think Crash being in Smash would be a monumental moment in gaming history where you have, I just want a screenshot of like Mario and Sonic and Mega Man and Pac-Man and Crash and Banjo and Minecraft Steve and all these characters from all these different companies that are important to video games in one. So Crash comes to mind first in that
Yes.
other DLC. After that, I personally would love like Skull Kid from Majora's Mask. I think that would be awesome as a first party, or Geno. I'd take either one. I think probably Geno.
Oh my god, I thought we were gonna get him this time. Like,
So do
legit.
I. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Poor Papa Geno's. We shed a tear for you, my brother. And then either Master Chief or Doom Guy. I think we've had. I don't think we have a true Microsoft rep in Smash, even though we have a Minecraft presence and a Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo-Kazooie is rare. Microsoft has nothing to do with Banjo-Kazooie as far as I'm concerned. That's
Yeah.
Nintendo as far as I'm concerned. And then Minecraft is an indie rep as far as I'm concerned too. It doesn't matter that Microsoft bought Mojang. That's an indie game.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so we need Master Chief as a Microsoft rep, in my opinion. But then if we also got Doom Guy, who I'd also be a fan of, it'd feel a little redundant in terms of like how similar that they would be. And maybe some Doom fan will scream at me and say Master Chief can't be more different than Doom Guy or whatever. But
Yeah.
but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, you also gotta keep in mind that there are gonna be people who have no prior exposure to either franchise who
Yeah.
are just gonna see two armored dudes in green, just like, oh, okay.
You say that, and then someone talked about how Banjo and Kazooie can't be in the game because they'd be too similar to Duck Hunt, and I lost my mind. I was like,
What?
they could not be more different. No.
Oh my god.
Yeah, you might as well say that they'd be a clone of Ice Climbers because there's two of them. Like, that's ridiculous. Anyway, I actually made a YouTube video that was complete satire and sarcasm, saying I can't believe Banjo-Kazooie are just a Duck Hunt clone when the trailer came out,
Oh my
and
god.
way too many people thought I was serious. It was really funny.
Oh no.
And then to close out the DLC Fighter Pass, I guess I don't have really anyone else I'd strongly consider for the last two that I can think of. But those characters, the ones that I mentioned, I feel like would be good to include to kind of close it out.
Okay. To quickly go over mine. I am biased as a Sega guy. If I was born in your era, I probably would be having a Genesis. So first off, I think he's an assistant ultimate, or at the very least in Smash 4, somewhere. But Akira Yuki from Virtual Fighter, I would just want him. It just feels right. Like, you have Tekken,
Yeah.
like, yeah, it would just make sense to me. I would also want a Puyo Puyo rep. Aro Amity. No, I just feel it just makes sense. I could just like picture it in the trailer, just having a nod, both to Sonic and Kirby, because Kirby's Avalanche, being Beam Machine,
Right.
it just writes itself. We already have Terry, so that that fulfills the
Yay.
not Marvel Capcom vs. SNK fan in me.
Sorry, I meant to mention this. Rayman. That's a huge one that I missed.
Oh no, that he deserves it. Like after
He deserves it. He
after
100%
that Smash
deserves
4,
Yeah.
thing.
And he's
Man.
a spirit in Ultimate, and he's a trophy in Smash 4, and his proportions fit. He'd fit in with the rest of the cast. I did not mean to interrupt you, but I just really need to include Rayman in there.
Oh no, you are completely right. I also feel like just the way that Knuckles plays in Project Plus, like I'm biased. I like Sonic, but just like having like one of her Sonic rep, that'd be nice. I would definitely
Yeah.
like that.
Agreed.
In terms of other game characters, okay, now I'm just sounding silly, but I just feel like for the sake of it, like because like we do have indie rep, we have Sans, we have Shovel Knight, we have Minecraft. For the sake of it, I feel like the internet would explode if we had like any sort of rivals rep in Smash. Oh my god!
Any what rep? I missed what you said.
Any sort of rivals rep in Smash.
Oh, like Rivals of Aether?
Yes.
Oh my
Can you
gosh,
imagine?
that would be so cool.
Oh my god. If we see, that's the thing when it comes to like indie rep of like that Newgrounds era, like Freemakers is like nailing that niche for me. But if I could choose like one person from like that era, I would definitely go for Fancy Pants Adventures. I'm just biased towards him. And honestly, like I know for a fact there's probably like some hugely obvious character. But I guess that's just like the crux of Ultimate, just like having such a huge roster. Just like who else is there at this point? So I'm capping it off at there.
Cool.
But those are some great picks.
Yeah, you had some great picks too.
Thank you. And just the final thing I have before I send you off. This is a animation podcast first and foremost. So not to say that any of our discussion has been like bad, far from it. But the reason I open the floodgates to anyone is just that I feel like I could get into discussion about animation from people who aren't necessarily like focused in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sounds great.
Oh yeah, so I'll just start you with a quick low ball. Just what are some cartoons that like you're familiar with? Like even if it's like some more recent stuff or some that you grew up with, feel free to just lay it out on the table.
All right. There are two specific animations that I remember, I'll say grow up with, because it was around the same era of Melee, 2001-ish, 2003-ish. And the two shows that my brother and I did not grow up with cable, so we had a pretty limited amount of cartoons we would watch. But the one that we did, we got the Fox Box.
Yes.
And Fox Box had Sonic X and Kirby right back at you.
Yeah.
And my brother and I loved that to death. We had this ridiculous DVD in the mail on one of our magazine subscriptions. I don't remember what magazine subscription it was, but
God. Oh my
it was called the Fox Box.
The
like
fight for the Fox. The Fox.
Yes,
Box?
yes,
oh
yes.
Oh my god.
Do you know that?
Yes.
No way.
Oh man, I know like some videos actually that were just like riffing on that, and just like again, just like tying it back to advertising. It's just like so cheesy but so earnest. I love it.
So cheesy. And what's crazy is, of course, they got the actual voice actors to say these ridiculous things like, what's the code, Biko? And, whoa, I can't wait to watch Kirby on Saturday. Like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle talking about watching Kirby and stuff.
It was either Raphael or Michelangelo. Who
it was just absurd. And it was like, and you have like DDD like talking to freaking Shredder from, and it was just absurd. But I ate it up. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Oh my god. I guess just like enjoying crossover is just like something that's just embedded in our DNA.
That must be. Yeah, it must be. And then, hey, I'm assuming you're a fan of the Avengers. I don't know, just a hunch.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely a fan of them.
Another crossover. So
Marvel's Capcom vs. SNK.
Yeah.
I know, like Project X Zone if we want to bring it all together.
Right.
Like, why not? But anything more recent, or if do you not? Like, it's fine if you don't. Like, obviously, just figured to ask.
Let me think for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there has been an animated thing I've seen recently. I don't watch that many shows because I'm usually just making stuff
Oh,
and I
trust
get
me, I
distracted.
know how that is.
Yeah, so nothing recently, no.
Okay. But no, those some great picks, honestly. If I had like one recommendation, I don't know how you feel about anime, but if I had like one recommendation, something I could name drop for you, it
Oh,
would be
please.
oh yeah, it would definitely be High Score Girl. It's an anime that I found on Netflix around 2019, and it definitely is just like framed around like a old Japanese love story about like a boy and a girl, but it's just like so interesting because of the fact that it's just a time capsule of gaming culture, and they actually name drop a lot of stuff like PC Engine, Mega Drive, the arcade fighting game culture scene back then in Japan, and it's just like two things that you really wouldn't think would work together, but they just do, and I just love that. And I also my friend Bash is also gonna love me for bringing this up, and maybe any fans in the audience. But something that I also admire in like more recent shows, especially on Cartoon Network in like the mid to late 2010s, that they started to address and reference games and just like stuff in pop culture in general, just like more into like the early to mid to no a little bit the late 2000s. If I remember correctly, one of the most rewarding sight gags in Steven Universe was the fact that you saw Steven's game console progress over time because he just like casually was just playing like he was playing like a golfing RPG in one episode and was obviously his N64. And I remember specifically, and I love like seeing this in the Uncle Grandpa crossover for like I feel like 10 seconds max. He was playing with Uncle Grandpa on was an obvious GameCube, and they were playing an
Mm,
obvious Smash Brothers clone. And I'm just like,
cool.
oh man, honestly, like Cartoon Network, that's just like a formula because like they had a Smash like game, Punch Time XL, and I know Rebel Taxi talked about it briefly, where it's like they originally they had like more ideas and they wanted to make it more Smash like, but the execs were kind of treating them unfairly, and they just ended up like tinkering with it and just like I mean the product was just like great, especially for kids, but can you just like imagine if something like that were actually like competitively viable?
Wow. I love little Easter eggs like that. I didn't know about that. That's really fantastic.
Oh yeah, like I admire that a lot. Especially I feel like people my age, in the midst of like the pandemic, are just like finding like competitive depth in just like a lot of these games. Like,
Yeah.
I know Shrek Super Slam Ball things has a scene. I know the Kamen Rider games on Wii, who I think like are made by the DBZ Budokai people, and Tetsuno vs. Capcom developers apparently. That has a Netplay community. And it's just nice. It's just nice to just like have people just like come out, just like really like and Sonic Riders, uh, Small World. Uncle Punch is actually involved with that game's tournament team as well. It's just man, it all
Uncle
really
Punch is
does
a
come
true
together.
lad. He's a true lad.
Indeed. And obviously, we could go on for this for probably like another 45 minutes, but
Yeah.
I will let you go. You have been a wonderful guest. But before we head out, how can viewers keep track of you? Is there anything you're working on that you would want our viewers to know about?
Thank you for asking. I think just to see whatever I'm working on, you can go to davidvkimball.com and it's spelled Kimball. And that kind of has a list of all the things I worked on, including the elevated documentary. So if you're interested in game development or you're interested in Melee's roots, I would definitely advise you check it out. And then the one more thing I'd add to that is blippy.gg, blippi.gg, if you want to get into Melee at all. And you can browse those sources and figure out how to get connected.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, again, it has been wonderful talking with you. And I wish you a great day and just Don't be a stranger, honestly. It
Adam,
was
thank you
always
so
a
much
free
for having me.
space.
It was a total pleasure to be on here. You were a fantastic host, and you just kept the conversation flowing. I didn't want to leave, so thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, honestly. And I will just say that this has just been another great episode of the KashCast. I just want to thank everyone for supporting this. I have been Adam or Cash,
I've been David V. Kimball.
and we will see you next time. Take care, stay safe, wear a mask, and love and peace always.
Complete.